Good morning, great souls.
Good morning.
Well, I will greet my friends, and I also want to let you know a couple of things. Online, there's been about 80 or plus different people watching on computers. So
Computers watching,
Right.
and some of those represent groups, so probably more people watching online than are here in class.
And we checked with Sitabai, and Touch of Joy is #1 bestseller. And by the way, it was out of stock, but now it's in stock. So they got replenished from the first printing. And in the general category, it's 500 something, which is huge. I mean, they have millions of books on Amazon. So in yoga, it's #1, general category, 500. So thanks all of you everywhere.
That really represents a victory for Master's light to get out into the world. And very beautiful and significant. Let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Beloved Master, help us to attune every thought, every feeling, every action to thy great consciousness. You are our pathway to freedom and self-realization. And use us as thy channels to spread thy love and joy to everyone. Om. Peace. Amen.
Every morning when I greet the sun, when I move forth through crowded ways, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so
As we have been, we'll begin with a call to the divine to awaken within us. How is everyone?
Awake and ready.
All right, here's Devi.
Could you get the table? We're switching today. I'm starting. Thank you. Okay, so thank you all who have been with us in person or online all week. It's just been a wonderful week. And today we're going to be talking about the third of our pillars on our path, attunement. And last night, as we were thinking about the class, this story came to me, kind of like an allegory. And I wrote it down, and I'm going to recount it to all of you. And it's called The Art of Following. And I want to dedicate it to my friend, our friend, Sitabai Betts, who followed Santiago El Camino. She, by herself, walked that journey for 6 weeks, was it? All by herself, through sickness and health. And all this to raise money for the new temple, which will be out here. But it was the art of following. And so that's what this story is about. There was a teacher, and he gave to each of his students a map. And he said, "This is a treasure map, but each one of your maps is different. But you must only follow the map that I have given you." And they start out on their journey to find this treasure that the map shows them how to get to. Well, it's fun telling stories. Much more fun than giving a class. So they begin on their journey, and at first the terrain is fairly familiar and commonplace, and in fact they're all on the same road, walking along together and enjoying the camaraderie and talking and laughing, following their maps, making sure they don't make a wrong turn. And they continue this way for some time. And then after a while, some of them, because not much is changing, they're just walking and walking. The countryside is pretty much the same. And after a while, some of them start to get bored and impatient. And they say, "I'm not getting anywhere. We're almost like where we began." And they said, "You know, I think I can see a shortcut that I'm going to take up ahead." And they go off. And the others keep walking and walking. And some of those who take the shortcut, they're never seen again. They don't come back. But some of them, after some time, they can sort of see them coming from a distance over a very high crag, and they're disappointed and tired, and they have to come back to the same point on the map where they left to take the shortcut. And so they have to start all over again. Now, some of them also are getting a little tired of this journey, although it hasn't been going on for very long. And they start to look over at their neighbor's map. And they think, "I think his route is better than the route I've been given." And so they start to kind of look at it, And they start following their neighbor's route. But what happens? Some of them end up at a dead end. Some of them end up have to stop at quicksand. And some of them come to the edge of a high cliff, and they realized, I shouldn't have followed my neighbor's map. And they too have to wend their way all the way back to where they stopped following the map the teacher had given them. But then there are some, and they're getting tired, and the way is plodding, but they think, my teacher told me to follow this route, and I will do this. And then some of the other ones, the other students who were the ones who were getting impatient before they took the shortcut, they said, why are you following just what your teacher says? I don't think he even has a GPS. And his way is antiquated. Let's try a new way. And the third group said, never mind. I'm happy following what my teacher said, and we will just continue along this route. And so they do. And by this time, the group is a bit smaller than the group that took off initially, but they keep going, and they keep going. But then they begin to notice that the lines, the routes on their map, are starting to fade and become very faint, and in fact, almost invisible. And the countryside they're in is it's different now. It's not familiar. They're breaking into new territory, and they begin to get uneasy. And part of the group in their uneasiness says, I'm going back. This isn't familiar. I'm going to just stay right here. I'm not going to go any further. I know where I am right now, and I'm going to wait. I'll just wait till something else happens. And so they don't put out the energy to move forward, but they just wait. Another group says, they're uneasy in this unfamiliar territory, and they see some strangers walking by, and they say, I'm going to ask them for directions. They probably know. And so they go up to the strangers, and the strangers do give them directions. But the directions lead them back to what is familiar, what is easier, what is emotionally satisfying, and that's where they end up. But then there's a third group, and they call out, and they say, Lord, I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my way is dark and my stars are gone, please, with thy mercy, show me the way. And then they hear a voice, and that voice says, just follow my guidance. I will guide you. And when they look at their map, the pathway is illumined again. But this time, it's in lines of gold. And then they keep moving forward. By this time, the group is quite small. Others have been left. They've taken advice of strangers, or taken shortcuts, or got bored, didn't want to listen to what the teacher had said. And then this last group says, then they come to a point as they journey where they enter a dark cloud, and they look at the map, and to their shock, it's totally blank. There's nothing on the map. And they sit down, and they cry out with all their heart, Lord, I am afraid. I am lost. Where are you? Why have you abandoned me? And then they hear a voice that says, to those who think me near, I will be near. Be still, go within, feel my presence. And the few students who have come this far, they do. They sit down, They interiorize their consciousness. They feel the presence of their teacher. And then they begin to see a beautiful golden light. And within that light is a blue field, radiant blue, alive. And then, even more distant, is a beautiful silvery white star. And the teacher says to them, "Come, surrender to me all that you know, all that you have, all that you are, and we will find the way." And the students let the map, which is now just a blank sheet of soiled, wrinkled paper, they let that map fall from their hands because they realize that this journey was never about moving from one place to another in an outer landscape, that this was a journey of consciousness, an inner journey that can't be taken as long as we think we have to get somewhere outward, that the treasure, these souls sitting in that stillness, realized the treasure they were always seeking was not something outside themselves, that it was always inside. But they had to, in total courage and devotion and trust in the teacher, they had to say, "I will follow, though the way is not clear." And they, in that total surrender, they inwardly reach out to their teacher, who is their friend, who is their guru. And the guru and the disciple join together, and together they move forward through the blue light, through the silver star, and they find that great treasure, the pearl of great price, their eternal home in the kingdom of God. So, that's the story. So I think most of you got the symbolism. At least when we talked about shortcuts, people got that one. But let's talk a little bit more of what this story means to me, and I hope means to you as well. The teacher gives each one of us, the guru gives each one of us our own path to God, our own map. And at first, everyone seems pretty much the same because we're new. And we haven't differentiated yet. Our karma is still new devotees on the path. But then the wise teacher realizes that each student, each disciple, must follow their own unique way. I remember some years ago, we were having a Kriya initiation with Swami Kriyananda, and afterwards a few of us gathered around him, and he said, "I had the most unusual experience during this initiation. As each of you came up to me for the blessing during the Kriya ceremony," Swamiji said, "I could feel the unique way that each one of you would find God." And I'll never forget that for so many reasons, if not the least of it, that we would find God. But more than that, that each one of us has our own map, and we can't walk anybody else's route. It's disaster if we try. I love the statement in the Bhagavad Gita where it says, better to fail at your own Dharma than to succeed at someone else's. So even if we feel, I'm not growing spiritually, if you're doing what your guru has given you, if you know that you are in alignment with Dharma, don't worry about if you succeed or not. The guru knows what's going to bring you to freedom, and you just keep moving forward in that way. So it's so important to rejoice in our own unique struggles on the spiritual path. No one has it easy. Remember that. No one's route is easier, avoids the bumps. If they have an easy route, it's because they're not ready for more yet. I used to wonder in the first year I was at Ananda, because I was going through so much inner turmoil and struggle and trying to be on the path. And there were some people who just, everything went right for them. But I noticed those people never ended up staying. And the people that were kind of really fighting their own inner karmic battles, those are the people who stayed and who are still here today and who are becoming closer and closer to freedom. So rejoice in the way our guru has given us. But then other points, there are no shortcuts. So I love what Ananda said one time. He said people sometimes come to me and they say, I found these teachings that are just like Master's teachings, and I'm doing them. And Ananda would say, you know what's just like Master's teachings? Master's teachings. You don't need to have anybody interpreting them and giving you a variation. You stick with the map you've been given. It's designed for you to find that treasure. And then we go on our journey, and there are times when we lose our way, when the map isn't clear. And then this is where we need to understand that if the guru spelled it out for us, we would not be growing in the same way. Swami talks in his autobiography, The New Path, in the chapter on attunement. He said, Master rarely gave us direct advice. He hinted at things. And why? Because it's in that transition between knowing with the mind and knowing intuitively with the heart that wisdom comes. If Master, Swami said, when Swami said when Master appointed him head of the monks, he was 23 years old. Many of them had been there years longer than he had and were years older than he was. And Master said to Swami, now I want to talk with you and I'll tell you what I want you to do. But he never did. And Swami said, I had to figure it out intuitively. That's why the map fades. That's why it becomes blank at times. Because it's for our own good that it isn't always clear. It's for our own good that we have to kind of struggle and flounder around, because that's where we intuitively say, Lord, I need your guidance. And this little thought came to me. I need the real GPS system, God's pole star. I didn't tell you that one. And so this week too, we've been talking about, so far, Monday's class was on sadhana, Tuesday, seva. And so it is with our meditation. We can get the techniques. You can get them online, you can get them in a book, you can get them many ways. But just as an artist can go to school and learn color theory and design and perspective, but they can't create a great work of art. We can get all the techniques, but unless we have that attunement and that intuitive understanding that we can't do it without the grace of the Guru, without the inner guidance of the Guru, we won't be able to stick with our sadhana because it will only be mechanical. But it's only when we can say, okay, I've got a map. It's not that clear, this map of how to meditate, how to do Kriya Yoga, how to transcend the ego, all of these things. And without you infusing them, Master, with your inner guidance, without you illuminating them, I can't do this. And so we need to understand these three pillars, sadhana, seva, attunement, they're all linked together. They're all linked together. And in our meditation practice, when we begin to understand this has to be personal, this has to be something that is meaningful to me as an individual, as I sit in my meditation room, then we're holding it at a distance. And it's the language of attunement is a subtle language that can't be learned with the mind, with the eyes, with the ears. I've been reading a little bit recently about Helen Keller. Some of you know about her life. She was a remarkable soul. And she was born in a fine family, but when she was 19 months old, she was stricken with a very severe fever and became permanently blind and deaf for the rest of her life. But and her parents didn't know, this is captured in the wonderful movie, The Miracle Worker, if you haven't seen it. But her parents didn't know what to do with her. They didn't know how to communicate with her. So she was just like a little wild animal, trapped in her own deafness and blindness. And then they took her to a school for the blind and deaf. And the teacher there said, we have a young teacher here, Annie Sullivan, 20 years old. And she's partially blind herself, but I think she can help your daughter. So they brought Annie Sullivan to their home. And it's a remarkable moment in the movie and in her life, Helen Keller's life, where Annie Sullivan is trying to get her to make the connection between what she's tapping out in her hand and an object. And there's that moment where she gets it. It's with water. They're pumping water from the pump, and it pours all over her. And Annie Sullivan is signing in her hand, and finally she gets it. And this world opens up for her. And she won't stop. She wants to know what everything is that she can touch. And Helen Keller went on. She was the first person in the world, blind, deaf person, who got a BA degree. And she was a political activist and a writer and a lecturer. In the 1920s, she was being politically active for women's rights and women's vote, for labor rights, helping to form the labor unions. And she was a very anti-militaristic. So, incredible life she had. But because she was able to break through that language. And there's a beautiful quote of hers from Helen Keller. She says, and this applies directly to attuning to the inner guidance of the Guru. This is from Helen Keller, the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt in the heart. And this is a good guide for us. We must feel that attunement in our heart, because it can't be taught. We can all listen to every talk that Swami ever gave and read every word he ever wrote. But if we don't feel it in our hearts, it's just like wind blowing over the ocean. It dissipates. But if we can understand Let me feel this on an inner level. Let me learn the language, unspoken language of attunement. Let me feel that within myself. Then we begin to understand how to find our way to freedom. And similarly with our seva, with our service in this world. If we're just going about doing our job, and of course we live in this world. This isn't a monastery where everything is provided for us. We need to get a paycheck. We need to see there's some recompense in this world. But nevertheless, always try to remember in everything you do with intense awareness, what is the Guru telling me to do? How can I do this? I remember once some years ago when Ananda at that time had a very dynamic contracting company, house builders. And they would hire some of the women in the community after they'd finished the house to go in and clean it up so that the new owners could move in. So we'd vacuum and clean the windows and, everything that needed to be done. And I remember this one house, it was a big house, and it had a big living room, and it was carpeted. But because there had still been some construction, the carpet really needed to be vacuumed. So I was vacuuming and vacuuming and vacuuming, and I was getting tired, and I was, kind of getting a crick in my shoulder, and then I was not enjoying it. And I just thought, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because this is Ananda's way of serving the greater community, to build these beautiful houses, to have people move in and see them just all sparkling and filled with light. And so I just prayed, God, show me how to do this in a better way. And golly, he did. I mean, it was almost like I was I've never had this experience since with vacuum cleaners, but it was like I was dancing with the vacuum cleaner. It was just flowing, and we were moving, and it was so easy, and I don't know really what was going on, but all I know is that floor got finished, and it was immaculate, and I felt great. So everything that you do, there's the flow in it. There's nothing we do that you can't feel God's flow and grace and joy. Not one single thing. Not one single thing. But we have to ask for it. We have to say, where are you in vacuuming? Where are you in consulting with a patient at a clinic? Where are you in cleaning out the underbrush in a forest? Where are you in serving my mother? All these things, or my husband, or whatever. And that's where the attunement infuses the seva with God's presence. And so and then when you feel that presence, at the end of the day, you sit and meditate. And your activity, as Master said, helps your meditation, and your meditation helps your activity. But the link is attunement. That's how they both come together. And so, remember we talked on Monday that there were really 4 pillars, that there's sadhana, seva, attunement, but then the 4th one, which is seeing God in everything. And this again is where attunement comes in. Because if we attune to the ray of our guru, our line of gurus, then that ray, it's a real thing. It isn't just some words that we talk about. That ray of grace that comes at this time from our line of gurus. Master was asked, is this a new religion? He said, no, it's a new expression of ancient truths. And so this ray that has come now, at this time, in Dwapara Yuga, in world history, This ray has a particular mission. And we are the soldiers in that mission. But we have to align ourselves with that ray. And we have to draw on it in everything that we do. And why? So we think, okay, I'm God's soldier. I can live with that. But it's not just to further their mission. What is their mission ultimately? It's the freedom of you and me and all of us, every single one of us. That's their mission, that we find freedom in God as soon as possible. In this lifetime, if we can do it, if not, a couple more. But that ray is, it's not just a worldly mission. It's the liberation of souls. And just as in our story, ultimately, and as we said on Monday, you can't get there, you can't get to God from here, from the ego. You have to, the bridge between where we are now and divine realization is attunement with the Guru, is the Guru's ray. Because they are there, they reside there. And they're just saying, don't you want to come? Come in, the ocean of bliss is fine. And so we need to understand as each one of us move forward on this journey, following the route that the Guru has given us, as each one of us move forward, then light is brought into the world. Hope is brought into the world. Hopelessness is dispelled. Despair is dispelled. All the negative things that our society is plagued with, they are lessened a little bit. You know, there's a book that Swami often quoted. It's the life of Buddha, called The Light of Asia. I don't recall the author at this time. Edward Arnold. But he says, in that moment where Buddha achieved enlightenment, throughout the world this ray went out, and two people who were having an argument, suddenly they understood how to find harmony. The person that was suffering from great pain, their pain was eased. The child that was being born saw a new purpose to their life. And the soul that was dying, perhaps in fear and confusion, clearly could see the path of light to freedom. All happened unknown. Why? Because one soul had achieved cosmic consciousness, had found God. Well, for all of us, I love the little image Jyotish gave on Monday, where he talked about they do experiments with jars of M&Ms, and they have students come in and guess how many M&Ms are in that jar. Nobody gets it right, but collectively the average of what they all say is very close to the amount of M&Ms. Well, so it is with all of us. Maybe none of us will reach our final goal, find the end of the treasure map. Maybe some will, and I believe that's the truth. But nevertheless, collectively, the effort we make together in Master's Ray, in attunement to the Guru, this effort helps raise the consciousness of the planet. So as humble devotees, we say, okay, Master, I'll be your soldier. I'm not worried about what I get or what I receive. But in that consciousness, that's when God can fill up our cup. Swamiji said that attunement is about emptying out and then refilling with God's consciousness. And everything we do, sadhana, service, everything, it's about emptying out those parts of ourselves that are limited, so that God can come and say, this vessel is finally empty, I can fill it with my love and my light. And this is the essence of what attunement is. And we are so blessed, so fortunate with all that we've been given by our great gurus, by Swamiji, through our communities, through our divine friendship and joy, through the beautiful spirit that we see. I wish you could see Ananda through our eyes, because we get to see so many, many beautiful things around the world, so many stories of people's lives miraculously changed, people who were despairing, who are given hope. Some of you know this story, and I'll just close with this. We were talking earlier about the Paramahansa Yogananda Charitable Trust in Vrindavan, which works with the homeless widow. They call them widow mothers. And one woman, she was elderly, she was homeless, she was desperately ill. She had a huge malignant tumor on her back, and which reeked because of the decaying flesh. And she was just abandoned by the side of the road. No one would come to help her. And then a man walked up and said, "Oh, you should go to the Paramahansa Yogananda care home. They will care for you." And she was barely conscious. And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't even move. I can't get there. And this man clapped his hands, and a little rickshaw pulled up, and he told them where to go, and they took her to this home. This story was told to us. It's a true story by one of the women, a beautiful saintly person who runs this particular care home. We have 9 of them in Vrindavan, which house the widows. And this woman, whose name is Shama, she told us the story through translators. She only speaks Bengali. And so this woman appeared on their doorstep. And she said, usually when people are so dirty and so ill, so sick, they don't take them into the homes because they can't really care for them. They send them to a nearby charity hospital. But in this case, she said, I don't know why, we took her in and we cleaned her, and we saw this huge, tumor on her back. And after they cleaned her, they sent her to the hospital, but they said, you come back after they've healed you. And they did. They removed the tumor. She was in the hospital for some months, but she was cured, and she came back to the care home. And after some weeks, she came up to Shama holding a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. And she pointed to the picture on the cover, and she said, this is the man who found me on the street and who brought me here. And Shama just smiled because she knew it was true. And so the attunement, the ray of the Guru's grace is always there. This woman had never heard the Guru's name, didn't know who he was, but a sparrow does not fall, but that God does not see it. And so let us do our utmost now to let our attunement in everything we do, in our sadhanas, in our service, in our quest for God, may it all be drawn from the living presence of our Guru, who has come with one purpose, that the world, each soul, can come at last to the joy of God. And we can do this together.
I don't know about you, but I feel like Master found me on the roadside and brought me to this care home. And We'll see what happens. I want to start by reading this beautiful poem, but it's more than a poem. It's When I'm Only a Dream. It's Master's advice, his response to someone asking him, what will we do when you're gone? And this was his response. I came to tell you all of him, and the way to encase him in your bosom, and of the discipline that brings his grace. Those of you who have asked me to guide you to my beloved's presence, I warn you through my silently talking mind, or speak to you through a gentle, significant glance, or whisper to you through my love, or loudly dissuade you when you stray away from him. But when I shall become only a memory, or a mental image, or silently speaking voice, when no earthly call will ever reveal my whereabouts in unplumbed space, when no shallow entreaty or stern stentorian command will bring from me an answer, I will smile in your mind when you are right, and when you are wrong, I will weep through my eyes, dimly peering at you in the dark, and weep through your eyes perchance. And I will whisper to you through your conscience, and I will reason with you through your reason, and I will love you all through your love. I'll reread that because I misread it. And I will love all through your love. When you are no longer able to talk with me, read my whispers from eternity. Eternally, through it, I will talk to you. Unknown, I will walk by your side and guard you with invisible arms. And as soon as you know my beloved and hear his voice in silence, you will know me again more tangibly than you knew me here on this earth plane. And yet, when I am only a dream to you, I will come to remind you that you too are naught but a dream of my heavenly beloved. And when you know you are a dream, as I know now, we will be ever awake in him. You know, we project onto the Guru our own human failings. He comes only as a manifestation of God's love. And all he really wants is our happiness, our freedom, our eventual union with the beloved God. And yet, we have a tendency in the West, there is a wind that blows, and it blows against the acceptance of a guru. In the Yoga Journal, for instance, where we would occasionally publish something, they would talk a little descendingly about Ananda. Oh yes, that's just a guru path. As if there should be other kinds of paths that are better. But that's, I don't want to put anybody down. Everybody is searching in their own way. What I'm saying is that we can't look outside for validation that there is a wind blowing, just as teenagers tend to reject the advice of their parents, and they need to do it on their own. America, the consciousness of America is very good. Master loved the consciousness of Americans, but it's still a young consciousness. and it's a teenager's rebellious consciousness. And to a large extent, we're not ready as a whole society to accept that there is somebody who's wiser than we are, and who can actually guide us to where we're trying to get. You know, all of us have a kind of an existential dilemma, an existential pain. The soul is free in God, but when it takes on the ego, it becomes imprisoned in the consciousness of the ego. It's as if the ego is a desert island, or I don't know, if you think of a video game, we take on the form of some little player in that video game, and that becomes our identity. But along with that, there comes an existential dilemma, an existential pain, because entrapped or enmeshed or entranced though we might be, the soul, the real us, knows that we're only playing a video game through this carbon unit, and that there's something more. And we may seek that in that something more in many, many different ways. We may seek to dull the sense of loss or difficulty that we feel through drugs or alcohol or video games or diversions. There are thousands of ways that we try to cope with this existential pain, but the only way out is to reawaken to our soul nature. And that's the inevitable end of all things. So the guru comes not for his own benefit. He comes for our benefit, our yearning, he said, Master said that when he was sitting in that little room in Ranchi and the vision came, he said, I feel American souls calling me, yearning to be free, potential saints in America. And so he came in order to answer that call that we have. So when we project on Master that he is judgmental, or that he's upset with us, or that he is not pleased with us, that's all just a projection of the ego. Master is pure love, and our attunement to him begins with the desire, begins with our love, with our yearning for union, for acceptance, for being one with him. And when that yearning gets so powerful that there is nothing that we can do to hold it at bay, then we really begin the guru-disciple relationship. Master gave so much, so many talks, so many techniques, so much advice, that it is quite easy to end up feeling overwhelmed. Should we do this? He said to do this. I'm supposed to do that. On and on and on. He said that if we do 1/100th of what he asked us to do, that will be enough. That will get us there. Now we can't cherry pick that 1/100th. We can't say, oh, he said to just relax. So that's my path. How do we know? That's why I wanted to start with this. How do we know? What is our personal roadmap? How do we read that roadmap now that Master's gone? He obviously hasn't given us a literal map with lines on it. He's given a general map of the pathway to everyone, but what is our personal route in that map? And how do we find that route? And how do we follow that route? And it's important that we find that, and important that we follow it. As a precautionary tale, Master had a student at Ranchi, a woman, a teacher there, and she was a very, very great soul. And he told her that she should initiate people in Kriya. But this woman had a habit of going barefoot. And Master told her, you should wear shoes or sandals. She liked going barefoot, so she ignored that. Now, out of the whole gamut of things that might be said, how do you choose what he said to you as being what's really important? So let me go on with the cautionary tale. So she ended up eventually initiating over 5,000 people into Kriya. And Master was extremely pleased and called her a very saintly person. But he was insistent about her wearing shoes. And it was that she ignored. And eventually she contracted a disease through her feet, and she died an early death. So as I say, out of the thousands of things that Master might have said, how was she to perceive the signal that was important for her and avoid an early unnecessary death? Well, the key is in the fact that Master was insistent to her. Now, he has a lot of things, a lot of advice for each of us, but we have to determine for ourselves, where is he insistent for me? Not just generally, but where is he insistent? There's a general roadmap where he's very, very clear. He tells all of us that we should meditate. He tells all of us that we should do energization exercises. He tells all of us to do devotion. And there are many aspects of the path that he repeated again and again and again. And so he was insistent on those basic things. But then where beyond that should we pay attention? And that's why I wanted to read this. Because when he begins to insist through your own reason that I should really pay attention to this, or when he begins to insist through your own conscience that this is important, those recurring things where you feel like I'd better really pay attention to this, it comes again and again and again. And as Devi so beautifully said, that map, those points along the route will be different for each one of us. But we have to develop the ability to hear what Master is saying to us. And we're like Helen Keller. We're blind and we're deaf and we don't understand the language very well because the language is not verbal, it's silent, and it's more based on feeling and more based on the whispers from eternity that play through the mind and play through the conscience than it is on some very clear roadmap. So how do we find that, and how do we follow it? It begins, I think, most clearly and most powerfully by strengthening our desire to be in tune with Master. Simple as that. To strengthen your desire to be in tune with Master. Swami said that for many years he prayed, and more than pray out loud, more than a formula pray from the heart, that every thought that he thought be in tune with Master. And he said, I prayed that for years, and I did my best for that. And then I realized that that wasn't enough. That I wanted every feeling that I had to be in tune with Master. And every act and every word that I wrote to be in tune with Master. And so that gives us the key to what we need to develop in ourselves. So we just have to keep working at it. You know, I've worked at it for my whole life. And I can say from my experience that that desire for deep attunement increases and increases until it becomes, I don't know, an overwhelming compulsion to have Master's consciousness guide my own consciousness. We don't get there by just outer means, although outer means are important. He tells us, if you want to hear my voice when I am gone, read my whispers from eternity. I will speak to you through them. So that's one of the ways that we can be in tune with Master, is that we can read whispers from eternity, or we can read some of the other writings where read the autobiography, I read on Monday from Essence of Self-Realization, to pick up that book and read one or two or three of those short statements of Master, and then really meditate on it, and really try to attune, to really open yourself. What is he really saying here? What is the message for me? Swami often talked about how attunement happens not through the mind, but through magnetism. And he often used the example that if you take an unmagnetized piece of iron and you put it next to a magnet, or next to a powerful wire, because when energy flows through a wire, it creates a magnetic field. If you put that unmagnetized bar up close to that magnet or that electrical magnetic field, then it magnetizes the bar of iron. The bar then becomes its own magnet. You can take it away, and it still retains that magnetism. Master said that God does 50% of the work, that the Guru does another 25% of the work. That's all done through magnetism, through that power of energy that flows from them. Our 25% of the work is because for us, our bar of iron is our spine and our chakras. And we have a pair of legs and a mind that can move us closer to that magnetic field or move us away from that magnetic field. And so our job is not to produce the thoughts, not to produce the energy or even the desire for freedom, really. It's to move as close as we can, to get up as close as we can, as close as we will allow ourselves to get to that magnetic field that is Master. Now, he's not a bar of iron, he's consciousness. And so the desire to be as close as possible to that consciousness is really the absolute core of the spiritual path. Then from that, he will tell us, if you want to be close to my consciousness, you'd better meditate. You'd better do Kriya. Here are the techniques that you need to do. He doesn't give us very many, just a few, but he does give us some. And if we choose to ignore that, he isn't going to be mad at us. It's just like a doctor. If you go and you're sick and he gives you a prescription and you go home and you put the prescription on a shelf and you never get it filled, the doctor isn't mad at you. The druggist isn't upset. You just stay sick. And so Master's given us these things, and he won't be mad at us or upset with us. We will be upset with our own self, our conscience. He'll whisper to us through our conscience. That's why I say, look at those things that keep repeating and insisting in your mind and in your conscience, because that's Master trying to give you your roadmap and point out the direction. But our job is not to produce the spiritual path, not to produce the consciousness that frees us, but to attune to it. In the autobiography, Master said that thoughts are universally, not individually rooted, meaning that we don't create our own thoughts. We tune in to them. So as Swami put it in his last book title, our job is to cooperate with grace, to try to tune in our consciousness to the consciousness of the Guru, using all of the means that we have at our disposal. Studying his teachings, reading his writings, listening to his voice, reading, trying to absorb the whispers from eternity, being together with other magnets who keep us. As we move outside of a magnetic field, we begin to gradually lose that alignment. So coming back and being with others who have it, just as we're doing this week. This week is more about remagnetizing us into the alignment with the Guru than it is about information or content. It's a different, more subtle, deeper, more silent process. It starts with words, but Swami said, don't expect words to do it. Give people your vibration if you're speaking. So we're trying to live in Master's vibration. What's the result when you keep really sincerely, authentically trying to tune in your consciousness to Master's consciousness? Swami did that throughout his life. And in the last few years of his life, he began to say, I can't tell anymore where Master ends and I begin. It has merged together. But Swami there was always a dialogue going on between him and Master. One time, Devi and I were with him in the garden, and we were walking, and he just paused, And he kind of looked up and he said, "Oh, that's what he meant." And we said, "What?" He said, "I was remembering an instant that I was with Master." Now this was 60 years ago. And he was thinking about an instant that he was with Master. And he said, "Oh, that's what he meant. I remember that he was talking to another person, but as he was talking to him, he raised an eyebrow. And that meant that he wasn't giving that advice to that person, he was giving it to me." And so he said, "Oh, that's what he meant." Now, if we want attunement with Master, we don't have, Swami had the years that he lived with him, 3.5 years. So he has that kind of body of reference points that he remembered and worked with. But you and I, we have thousands of reference points of Master. We have the teachings that he has given. We have our meditations. We have our devotion. We have the example of other people. We have the example of Swami. We have thousands of reference points. Our job is to keep referencing our consciousness back to those points, because the mere process of trying to do that is 75% of the work. That's God and Guru are doing that work. So 75% of the work is us just trying to reference back our thoughts, our feelings, our actions to Master, to God. And it isn't complicated. It's really just the weak link in the chain is not the chain itself, it's that we forget to do it. Isn't that true? We get so engrossed in whatever's going on that we simply forget to try to reference back our consciousness to Master, to God. But if we will undertake the process of trying to do that, the process itself magnetizes our consciousness. And so that's why he says in here, "I will reason through your reason." But we have to try to align our reason with him. As Swami put it, let me have every thought that I think be in tune with Master. And we need, if we want to be in tune with Master, also take on that. Let all my actions. Now there will be times when we're not ready to do that. There will be times when we hear that whisper pretty strongly in our conscience, but we're not ready to do it. One time somebody was talking with Swami and she said, "Oh, Swami, it's so hard to know what to do." He said, "No, it isn't. You know very well what to do. You're just not ready to do it yet." So for many of us, it's not hard to know what we should do. We know it. But we're not ready yet. We're not willing yet to surrender that thing, that self-definition, or that issue that we are holding on to. So is Master mad at us? No. He isn't mad at us. All he is a magnet of love. Another way of trying to get in tune with him is that he said that of the 8 qualities of God, he particularly manifested 3 of them. And it's certainly true of Swami also. And that was love and joy and wisdom, those 3 qualities. You know, all of the books and lectures that both Master and Swami have poured out into the universe as an expression of wisdom. But divine friendship, divine love, is really the most powerful of all. Master was a Prem avatar, avatar of love and joy. And so if we can try to be channels for those three qualities, that will also help align us. Those three qualities are like the DNA of Ananda, the DNA of our work. And if we can get in tune with those, each of us in our own way. Wisdom doesn't come just by passive reading or not reading at all or not trying to understand. It comes from using the mind as powerfully and as clearly as we possibly can in order to understand what the path is. Understand what is meant by this. How does the soul manifest? What locks us into the body? What is prana? How does it function? Why is the breath so important? To just chew on those and try to understand what Master or what Swami have said about these issues. How do we get free? So we have to use part of the DNA of Ananda is to use our minds as powerfully and as clearly as we can to understand and then also to share. Because Master and Swami came, their mission was to share. But even more important than that is love and friendship and the kindness and compassion that is awakened in the heart and expressed to each other. That's why harmony is so important in Ananda. And friendship. Ananda is not an organization. Ananda is a family. Ananda is a group of friends who have chosen to reincarnate in order to be together and in order to love each other and support each other and help all of us to move together, to discover what those golden lines are at the end of that map, to work on that together. And that friendship and harmony, and I'm not saying that as a corrective, I'm saying that because the harmony is so strong and friendship is so strong throughout Ananda. But we need to understand how precious, really precious that is, and not lose it, because the real magnetism comes from our loving each other and from our supporting each other, from our wanting the very, very best for each other. And as that impulse grows strong within us, that attunes us to Master, because that's why he came, was to love us, to be our friend, to want the very best for us, and to show us how we can get there. And then finally, we should try more than what we do. Maybe I'm speaking to myself here. I'll speak to myself and you can overhear the conversation. Jyotish, you should try more than you do to live in joy. You should practice it toward the end of meditation until you feel the sense of joy. You should try to strengthen that, and then you should hold on to that. Don't let worries break you out of that. Don't let concerns break you out of that. Surround yourself like Yogacharya Oliver Black did. Surround yourself with a bubble of joy, and don't let anything break that. So I'm giving myself that advice. I did it out loud. If you want to follow the advice that I gave myself, feel free. Because if we can do that, it leads to the other thing that Swami said toward the end of his life. Well, he said many things, but another thing. He said, I can't tell where Master ends and where Master ends and Kriyananda begins. He also said, I feel so blissful, I can hardly stand it. Sometimes Devi and I would come down, and, he was hard of hearing. He usually invited us down for tea. So we would come into the apartment, and because he was hard of hearing, he wouldn't know that we've come in. And he would be laying back in his chair with this ecstatic smile on his face, just kind of looking up at the ceiling, or he'd have his eyes closed. Then he'd notice that we were there, and then he would kind of come down and re-engage as a human being again. But I feel so much bliss, I can hardly stand it. That comes from following the advice of staying in a bubble of joy. And so these three things, plus listening to the whispers of Master in our conscience, in our mind, and in our heart, are the way that we achieve attunement with the Guru. And if we do, then as Devi ended her story, he will take our hand and lead us out of the body into that beautiful spiritual eye and into the five-pointed star of cosmic consciousness that's waiting for us.